Authorities tracked her down in Juarez last month in a joint operation with Mexican and U.S. officials.
At 6 a.m., federal agents executed a raid on the Minnesota Department of Education, arresting Secretary Marian Ali Gullette. What looked like a corruption case revealed a CJNG cartel command center operating inside the government. This video exposes the $180 million logistics ring, the murder of a whistleblower teacher, and the shadow network exploiting the U.S. resettlement program. 6 a.m., Minneapolis, Minnesota. The city was waking up under a blanket of heavy gray clouds. The streets around the state capitol complex were quiet, save for the occasional city bus or delivery truck. To the morning commuters, the Department of Education building looked like a sanctuary of bureaucracy, dull, safe, and silent. But the silence was deceptive. Under the cover of the morning fog, a massive federal operation was already in the final stages of deployment. More than 120 federal agents from the FBI, DEA, and ICE had silently surrounded the perimeter. They were not there for an audit. They were there for a takedown. There were no sirens, no flashing lights. The only sound was the synchronized movement of tactical teams stacking up near the rear loading docks and the main glass atrium. The target was a government building that was never meant to be a crime scene. It was a place of public trust. But intelligence had confirmed that inside, the machinery of the state was being used to fuel a cartel war. At 6:01 a.m., the command was given, execute. The glass doors of the main entrance shattered under the force of a battering ram. Federal agents, move, move! The shout echoed through the marble lobby, bouncing off the walls of the silent atrium. Teams surged forward, bypassing security desks and heading straight for the elevators. Their target was the third-floor executive suite, the private office of Marian Ali Gullette, 42 years old, the Minnesota Secretary of Education. Inside the suite, the atmosphere shifted from silence to chaos in seconds. As agents breached the outer reception area, they heard the distinct, frantic sound of industrial shredders running at maximum capacity. A brief but violent struggle erupted near the inner sanctum. Desks were flipped, cabinets were forced open with crowbars. Armed teams pushed forward, room by room, clearing the space with military precision until resistance collapsed and the building went silent. Marian Ali Gullette was taken into custody on the spot. She was handcuffed while still wearing her blazer, standing amidst a storm of shredded paper. But what investigators found inside her office stunned even seasoned cartel hunters. It wasn't just paperwork. Sitting openly on a mahogany conference table were 8 kilograms of pink cocaine, a synthetic mix of ketamine and MDMA packaged for rapid distribution. Next to the drugs were vacuum-sealed bricks of heroin.
According to officials, the Sinaloa cartel moves the drugs into Arizona, then distributes them all over the state.
And multiple unauthorized firearms with high-capacity magazines. But the most damning evidence was taped to the side of a shipping crate. Logistics manifests stamped with the distinct codes of the CJNG, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel. This wasn't hidden in a basement or moved through back alleys. It was stored openly inside a government office. A senior official was accused of running a drug operation from the center of public authority. This was not corruption. This was war hidden behind paperwork. If you support the brave men and women of the FBI and ICE who hunt down these threats to protect our communities, hit the like button and comment USA below. Let's show them we stand with them. To understand why a state official was holding cartel inventory, you have to rewind 3 months earlier, to the disappearance of a local contract teacher. He was a man who believed in the system. One morning, his classroom lights were off. By nightfall, his phone went silent. His family couldn't reach him. There was no resignation letter, no goodbye. He simply vanished. What investigators later uncovered was far more disturbing. In the days before he disappeared, the teacher had accessed restricted education files tied to high-level approvals, records that were never meant for classroom staff. He had flagged inconsistencies. Names appeared twice in the database. Dates didn't match. Shipments of educational supplies were logged for schools that had been closed for renovation. Security logs showed his access badge was used after midnight inside an administrative wing that should have been empty. Cameras captured him leaving alone, clutching a thin folder tightly to his chest. He never made it home. Days later, his body was found inside a sealed warehouse near the Duluth port. There were no signs of robbery. This was not random violence. The injuries were precise, controlled, and forensic. They were meant to send a warning. Investigators reached a chilling conclusion. He wasn't killed for what he did. He was killed for what he discovered. From that moment on, the case was no longer about a missing teacher. It became about a system willing to erase anyone who asked the wrong questions. The raid on Secretary Gullett's office was not the start of the investigation. It was the retaliation.
Christina and John, federal agents say this operation prevented fentanyl from flooding communities across the country.
By the time investigators connected the murdered teacher to internal education records, the case entered a far darker stage. This was no longer about a single official abusing power. What emerged was a drug distribution system deliberately embedded inside public institutions, built to move narcotics quietly and without detection. Analysts traced 47 internal approvals tied to the same chain of signatures. Different departments, different offices, but always the same outcome. Files moved faster than normal. Required reviews were skipped. Alerts were manually disabled by IT administrators who were allegedly on the payroll. More than $180 million labeled as educational logistics funding was redirected through shell vendors that existed only on paper. The money did not disappear. It was used to move cocaine, heroin, and synthetic drugs through established corridors linked directly to the CJNG cartel.
Approximately 198 kilograms, or an estimated 1.7 million counterfeit fentanyl pills, along with an additional 12 kilograms of fentanyl powder.
The structure was layered by design. At the top were officials like Gullett who approved actions without scrutiny, protected by routine and authority. Below them were employees, clerks, and coordinators who altered dates and duplicated IDs. Outside the offices were intermediaries, transport brokers, and port liaisons paid to move drug shipments under the cover of legitimate government paperwork. Investigators identified 23 active participants across education, healthcare, and port administration. 9 held clean backgrounds and valid security clearances. 6 had no criminal history at all. That was the design. The network relied on people who looked ordinary. But the most critical piece of the puzzle was the coordinator. While agents were securing the education department, a separate team was moving on a target 30 miles away. At 6:41 a.m., federal agents intercepted Hassan Abdrahman Warsameh, 29 years old, at Minneapolis St. Paul International Airport. He had cleared security and was walking down the jet bridge, boarding pass in hand, minutes away from fleeing the country. He never reached the plane. Agents blocked the bridge. No escape, no confusion. The central coordinator was in custody. Simultaneously, the operation expanded far beyond Minneapolis. This was a coordinated multi-site strike. More than 900 federal personnel were deployed across Minnesota. Convoys split off toward dozens of targets at once. Aircraft lifted from regional bases to monitor the highways. 17 locations in 6 counties were hit within a 90-minute window. In one city, agents seized encrypted phones still warm from recent use. In another, a warehouse revealed weapons caches and drug packaging materials disguised as school supplies. At a suburban office park, servers were taken mid-transfer, data frozen before it could be remotely erased. In portside facilities, shipment logs tied directly to CJNG routes were secured. This was not chaos. This was discipline. Every team moved with purpose. Every target had been verified twice. Resistance was met with control, not recklessness. Agents cleared rooms, secured evidence, separated suspects, and preserved lives. This was the difference between violence and authority, between criminals and professionals. By 10:30 a.m., the scale was undeniable. 68 suspects detained, 12,000 digital files seized, multiple CJNG-linked shipment routes shut down in a single morning. For years, the network relied on secrecy and silence. It believed paperwork could outlast justice. It was wrong. This was not revenge. This was accountability. The state did not panic. It stood up. And for the first time, those hiding behind authority understood the truth. The United States does not surrender its institutions. It takes them back. If you think the public deserves to see the full list of officials involved, we are tracking the indictments. As the raids unfolded, investigators began assembling what mattered most. Not the seizures, not the arrests, but the damage left behind. The evidence no longer lived only in warehouses and servers. It lived in medical files, school records, and death certificates. When those layers were aligned, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Over a 4-year window, analysts identified at least 61 overdose deaths tied to the same distribution corridor. The victims were not faceless statistics. They were teenagers, working parents, and elderly caregivers, people whose lives intersected with institutions meant to protect them. Emergency room logs showed spikes on specific dates. School attendance records showed absences that matched those same windows. The timing was exact. The overlap was deliberate. The drugs moved quietly, packaged to look ordinary, routed through channels no one questioned. When someone collapsed, it was written off as tragedy. When a family asked why their child's medical file had been altered or delayed, the inquiry stalled. The system absorbed the shock and kept moving. That was its strength and its cruelty. The most disturbing discovery came from cross-referencing education rosters with medical examiner reports. Several victims had direct connections to schools overseen by Hassan Abdurrahman Warsame and Secretary Gullet. Some were students transferred abruptly. Others were parents who challenged administrative decisions. A few were staff members who noticed discrepancies and refused to sign off. Their names appeared once in school files and again in hospital records. This was not coincidence. It was population control. Interviews with community members revealed a climate of fear that had gone unreported. Teachers spoke of pressure to approve changes without review. Nurses recalled instructions to delay reports. Administrators described warnings delivered quietly, never in writing. No threats were needed. Everyone understood the rules. Keep moving. Don't look back. As the investigation reached its public phase, the fallout moved from courtrooms into the political arena. Hearings were scheduled. A case that began with drugs and murder became a national argument about trust, oversight, and immigration policy. What unsettled lawmakers most was the exploitation of the resettlement program. Documents showed how the legitimate programs and language of public service had been used to shield illegal activity. Critics argued that loopholes in the vetting standards allowed individuals like Warsame to infiltrate sensitive positions. Supporters countered that the failure was institutional, a lack of oversight that could be exploited by anyone. But the facts refused to fit simple narratives. The network did not form after one appointment or election. It grew, adapting to audits, learning from near misses. Each cycle made it quieter, safer, harder to detect. By the time drugs moved through schools, ports, and clinics with the same paperwork, the system no longer recognized the threat as foreign. It recognized it as routine. Federal agencies reiterated their stance. Justice would be pursued without prejudice. Criminal accountability is individual. But the political consequence was unavoidable. Public confidence had been shaken. Parents asked how schools would be protected. Teachers asked how records could be trusted again. By the end of the week, arrests had expanded. Reviews were ongoing. The immigration debate remained intense but anchored to the reality of the breach. This case demonstrated how narcotics networks adapt. Drugs no longer move only through shadows. They move through spreadsheets. They hide behind administrative language. The final lesson is direct and unavoidable. Systems cannot be trusted to protect themselves. Oversight must be active, independent, and constant. When attention fades, abuse fills the space. This case did not end with arrests. It ended with exposure. Exposure of how easily authority can be misused when left unexamined. General Marian Ali Gullet and Coordinator Warsame now sit in federal custody. The CJNG route through Minnesota has been severed, but the question remains about the structural damage. Do you think government officials who use public schools to traffic cartel drugs should face the death penalty? Or is life in prison enough? Comment maximum penalty below.